that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. It is the best day of the week, not just because the weekend is almost here, but because it is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I am your host. I am also the vice president of the Heartland Institute. There's nothing else like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere, so I hope that you will like, share, and subscribe, and leave your comments underneath this video. All of these very easy to do actions help convince YouTube's algorithm to smile upon this program, and that gets it shown in front of more people. And a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not approve of the way we cover climate and energy on this program, the Heartland Institute's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. You can also pull out your phone and scan that QR code right here on the screen. And that can help us make sure this show happens every single week. Any support you can give is warmly welcome and greatly appreciated. And we also want to thank our streaming partners today, that being our friends at junkscience.com, CFACT, Climate Depot, What's Up With That, and the CO2 Coalition. So let's get started. We have a lot to go over today. I almost completely threw out the usual format of this show, but we're going to try to fit it all in anyway. But we have a lot of stuff to do. So let's just get to introducing our panel. We have with us, as always, Anthony Watts. He's a senior fellow for the Heartland Institute and publisher of the most influential climate website in the world, What's Up With That? We also have H. Sterling Burnett. He's the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute, and Linnea Lukin, research fellow for energy and environment policy at the Heartland Institute. Welcome, guys. Happy Friday. Happy Valentine's Day, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, well, Sterling and I tried to be festive, but you guys didn't even try.
Well, Jim's got his statutorily required flannel check shirt for the winter.
Yes, it is quite cold here in Northern Illinois. Woke up to about 5 degrees, and now it's 14 degrees. Ooh, nice and balmy. That's our high for today. And I know that we have a big polar vortex coming, so winter, after being very nice in the upper Midwest, is now becoming very normal in the upper Midwest. Before we get rolling, and I will apologize to our audience here, getting to start here. Andy, our regular super producer, is taking a day off today, and our backup producer, who is normally available, is also not available today. So I'm going to be trying to host and do all the good production stuff at the same time. Linnea is handling the comments as usual. Before we get rolling, I wanted to see if you guys saw this today. Let me see if I can share it on the screen. Yeah, so this was today. I didn't really, it needs to be, there we go, zoomed in a little bit. So today, Friday, our new vice president, J.D. Vance, gave his first big international address. And it apparently was a real great address. And we're going to be looking forward to seeing it, I think, after the show, because he talked about a lot of things and was very, very strong pro-America, and kind of talking to the European elites have not gotten in quite a while. And so, but one thing that relates to this show that caught my eye was that he took a shot at Greta, who we kind of take a gentle jibe at the beginning of every show. And so, the European Union is really complaining, and they want to go after Elon Musk, and they don't like what's happening here in the United States. And J.D. Vance said this. He said, "Trust me, and I say this with all humor. If American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg's scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk." But what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered. And basically, that was him talking about the idea of free speech, which is pretty important. So, boom, gauntlet thrown at the European elites.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know he took some good jabs at Germany during that speech because they have been actively suppressing one of their right-wing parties, and it's not even a far-right party. It would probably almost barely count as conservative in the United States. So it's pretty bad over there, and he rightfully took him to task for it.
Yep. All right. Well, there he is. Anthony Watts is coming back. Could have been an emergency. These things happen. All right. Welcome back, Anthony.
Sorry about that.
No worries. We're a live show. These things happen. All right. Well, we can get started. Like I said, we have a really big show we have a lot of stuff to go over, especially our main topic of, our new EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin trying to claw back from the gold bars that were thrown off the Titanic, as was said by a departing EPA guy for Joe Biden. So we are going to go ahead and get started with our show. And I don't have a producer. I'm going to have to hit the button myself. Here it is. All right. So thank you, Bill Nye, for our crazy climate news of the week. Our first item will be this. I don't know. What do you guys sent this to me this week? It was pretty funny. But apparently there is controversy, I suppose, over the proper forest management in the state of Washington. And so, of course, when anything good is going to happen, direct action is required by the environmental left. And so, they decided to do a coyote die-in to protest this. And here we go. So guys, I know that's more than a little silly, but this is what happens when you put theater kids in charge of anything. And do any of you guys think this actually has any effect on the world and on policy?
I think it has this effect. It turns people off to their message. As I commented earlier in the week when I saw it, I know coyotes. I have shot coyotes. These are not coyotes. And if they think that logging, which is what some of this forest plan actually allows, if they think coyotes like out of control wildfires any more than any other wildlife does, that destroys their habitat, that destroys their dens with their young, that kills them if they can't get out, then they're just stupid and dead wrong.
Yeah, this comment from Samot, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I had the same first reaction. I said someone needs to get animal control in there, because if they wanna LARP as coyotes, they can LARP as coyotes on their way to the wildlife rehabilitation center.
I only give them about 7 out of 10 for this one, because nobody's wearing a furry outfit, so really to me, I don't think they really commit, so I'm just not going to do what they want.
It would have to be a faux fur outfit, mind you.
But this is environmentalism personified right here in this video. This one video pretty much says everything about environmentalism today, whether it's on the climate side, the trees, the water, the bugs, animals, whatever it is. It's all about emotions. It's not about logic or facts.
When I was a kid, and probably still today, I don't have any children, but tantrums were thrown, and you fall on the floor and you go, no, I don't want to. And now my parents had a swift answer to that, which to grab me by the arm and swap my butt pretty good. And the tantrum ended pretty quickly. So that's what these people need is a swift butt kicking and being locked out of public meetings.
Yeah.
Well, Sterling, I think you should go out and do that.
Well,
Well, I like how the adults in the room decided, all right, enough. We've had enough. We're out of here. This is dumb. I'm out. And as one of our commenters pointed out, this is how you actually lose the argument. With every point you're trying to make, you're such an absurd person that you're not going to be listened to. In fact, you're incentivizing the person to take the opposite way and not get your way. So anyway, keep it up, guys. Fantastic news. All right. Second item for this week. This comes from, well, we all had this idea. We keep an eye on this. Oops, did I put the wrong? No, I did put the wrong thing up. So we don't need this up right now. Pardon me, just one moment, everyone. All right. So our second item is that Paris. Has Paris fallen? Have they done a Paris Has Fallen movie? They did Olympus Has Fallen. They did a Paris Has Fallen. Okay, I thought
they did back in I think the 60s or 70s. They did one called Has Paris Fallen, which was about the Germans and people saying, have they taken over Paris? Has it? So I don't know if they've made a new one.
Those recent
those current action movies. Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Fall and all this stuff. Anyway, doesn't matter. Paris Has Fallen. Now, Sterling, you wanted to hit on this briefly. So, you had mentioned to me this week that almost all the countries in the Paris Climate Agreement didn't even bother submitting their emission cuts commitments by the latest deadline. And then this comes on the heels of two studies that CNN reported on. One was in Nature Climate Change, that said there was a 60 to 80% chance that the Paris threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius has already been breached. And second, that James Hansen is saying that we've already blown past 1.5 degrees C and that we're likely to get to 2 degrees C and higher in the next couple of decades. So Sterling, I ask you, has the world just given up? And is that a good thing?
Yeah, I don't care about the science crap that Hansen's spewing or the other study, because we breached it. It's been breached, folks. 1.5 wasn't actually the target. It was 2.0.
We're having all sorts of technical fun today.
Yeah, we are having a great technical fun today. Somebody's Skype's going off. Go ahead, Sterling.
But the important point here is that by a variety of measures. Look, Paris was a failure from day one. The ink wasn't dry when I predicted it was a failure. It did nothing for China. It did nothing for India. They were growing emissions, and nothing we could do in the West would reverse that. And even the people at the time said, well, this is sort of a paper tiger because all the reductions are voluntary. Everyone submits their own voluntary, and then they're expected to do it. But it had no teeth. And guess what? I was right. I don't get to say that often enough, but I'm saying it today. We have had everyone talk about Paris. Oh, Paris! They're failing to meet Paris. Okay, folks, we've had climate agreements, including a treaty, since 1990. 20-something years of climate agreements. We had the initial agreement that said we will reach 1990 levels of carbon emissions by the year 2000. We had the Kyoto Treaty that said we will reach 7% below 1990 levels by the year, I think it was the year 2015. Yeah, 2015. We've had other dozens of agreements have been signed, much pontificating, many speeches, very public. Everyone, not just Paris, every treaty that's been signed, every agreement they've inked not a single part has been met. Funding mechanisms haven't been funded to the degree they said they would fund. Emission cuts haven't been hit. The Paris Agreement's no different. Kyoto failed. The first agreement failed, which was actually a treaty. We signed it. They haven't hit one. Paris is just the latest in a long string of failures, which tells you they really don't take it that seriously, because the world hasn't ended despite at every one of these meetings them saying, if we don't do it by X date, it's too late. Well, they set goals in Paris to have emissions reductions by 2020. Nobody's met those emissions reductions. They were supposed to, every 5 years after that, submit goals for making stricter emissions reductions. And this year, 2025, 10 out of the 200 nations submitted their updated emissions goals. And of those nations, none of them met their emissions goals in the last round. So, we're going to be tough this time. We know we missed, but we're meeting our commitment to set new emissions goals that we will subsequently not meet.
You're muted, Anthony.
I got him. I unmuted him. Anthony, we missed your joke. You were muted.
No. Actually, I think it's a problem. How about now?
Yep, we
You're
can hear
good.
you go.
Can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, that when I got that errant Skype call coming in, it switched the audio around. So that happened. Anyway, I've turned off Skype, so that won't happen again. But what I'd like to point out here, and Chris March points this out, that this 1.5 degrees centigrade target was really picked out of thin air, and it was just a convenient target to choose for something that was attainable, supposedly, right? They could have just as easily chosen 2 degrees centigrade, but they thought this one was one that they could capture the public's imagination with, and then remember all the stories that we were seeing in the press about what's going to happen when we get to 1.5 degrees C. All these bad things were supposed to happen to the climate, to the globe. We're going to get worse tornadoes, worse hurricanes, worse everything. Weather is going to be more violent, all that stuff. But the opposite has happened. Weather has become less violent. We've had less tornadoes. We've had less hurricanes, and so all of the pronouncements they made based on this 1.5 degree arbitrary limit have not come true. And now they're pushing towards, 2 degrees centigrade. Well, it's really going to happen at 2. We were wrong about 1.5. Yeah. It's always moving the goalpost with these people. The other thing is that 1.5 degrees C breach only happened because we had a combination of a double whammy spike between a bunch of extra water vapor injected into the stratosphere by the Hunga Tonga volcanic eruption, plus an El Nino. Those two things combined to give a big spike. Well, guess what? It's coming down now. The latest UAH satellite data showed that the temperature is dropping globally. So what are they going to do when it goes back below 1.5 degrees centigrade? They're going to look pretty dumb.
What they're going to do is take credit. They're going to say, "Oh, if we hadn't put all those emissions reductions in that we've done, we wouldn't have halted the rise in temperatures." In the end, you've written about this repeatedly, Anthony. If you look at the longest history of consistent temperature data, we've exceeded 2 a long time ago. So 1.52, set your supposed made up, because global average temperature is made up. There is no thermometer you stick in the Earth's mouth and say, "Oh, yep, that's the temperature, and this is where it should be." It doesn't exist. We make it up. That was breached a long time ago, and future temperatures will be breached, and the world won't end.
DJ Bo makes a great comment here on Rumble. He says, "Of course, Paris failed. If they don't fail, they can't make new agreements to fail at."
That's
and
right.
we kind of chuckle at it, but I think that's actually just correct. That's, it's the same with every government agency, right? If they don't have a new problem to solve, then their problem is over, and they're over. So they have to come up with a new problem to solve.
Yeah, I was at that Paris COP, and they did pull 1.5 degrees C out of the air. Some people wanted 1.7, others wanted 1.3. and they pretty much just compromised at 1.5. And there was all this discussion. It's like there's no scientific basis to it at all. It's this arbitrary, plucked out of the air, as Chris said, political number that is used to set a standard so that that can't be achieved, but is plausibly achieved. I guess that's what they were going for, so that they can control all of our energy and lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would point out that in the United States, when we look at the data from the Climate Reference Network, we've seen spikes of temperature as high as 4 to 5 degrees, and nothing has happened. The United States hasn't winked out of existence due to this spike in temperature.
No, indeed. All right, our next item up on here is going to be the one I brought up accidentally too soon, and that is our EV failure update. We like to check in here from time to time, see how things are going, and this is a story from Breitbart. On how, well, it explains itself. So BMW has a conservative approach to EV adoption, investing in platforms that can accommodate internal combustion, hybrid, and electric powertrains, and is now paying off as the company navigates the uncertain transition, to say the least, to electric vehicles. Jochen Goller, a BMW board member, recently acknowledged the uncertainties surrounding the shift to electrification, stating, quote, "I think it would be naive to believe that the move towards electrification is a one-way road. It'll be a roller coaster ride." This sentiment underscores the importance of BMW's diversified approach, which includes continued investment in modern combustion engines. That's a regular gas powered car to you and me. Plug-in hybrids alongside the rollout of new electric models. BMW's strategy has positioned the company well in terms of the global EV market share. In 2024, the automaker sold a record 426,594 EVs worldwide, representing approximately 17% of its total sales. I'm surprised by that, actually. When combined with hybrid and other electrified vehicle sales, this figure raises to around 25%. This balanced mix has allowed BMW to meet EU emission targets without resorting to heavy incentives to drive EV sales. Another very important point. So that approach by BMW, and you have to applaud them, is a lot smarter than Ford. They announced that they expect to lose $5.5 billion on EVs this year. By the way, they lost $5 billion in 2024, $4.7 billion in 2023. Do you see a trend here, guys? And the Ford CEO, Jim Farley, said this week that thousands of jobs are at risk now if Trump cancels all of the EV subsidies in the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, Linnea, I guess credit to BMW for trying to form a workable business plan in the face of the EU and the US, trying to direct the auto industry's future, not in a way that the market wants or cares about, but just the way it wants. And that it seems to me that Ford has just been gobsmackingly stupid. Did they really think that the American people were going to subsidize billions and billions in losses forever?
Yes.
Yes, they did.
Absolutely, they did. And they don't have any reason not to, because the U.S. government has bankrolled our major car manufacturers making massive mistakes with their investments before. So there's no reason for them to not expect that would happen, especially since at the same time the government was pushing all of these emission standards and everything that were going to make it more difficult to produce combustion engine cars legally in the first place, right? So yeah, they had no reason. And I'm probably the least hard on EVs out of this panel. I think in general, I think the technology is improving. I think that there's no reason why we shouldn't be, investing in it just because it's an interesting technology. I don't think I should be investing in it with my tax dollars, of course. I don't think that I should be forced to pick up the tab for people's lifestyle choices, especially since right now EVs are still mostly a luxury lifestyle choice. It's kind of crazy to be contributing to helping people buy luxury goods. The BMW thing is interesting. It was a good plan. I think Toyota has also been doing the same thing. They've been focusing a lot more on their hybrids, which one, seem to be a better technology in general, and two, they seem to be a lot more popular. I remember my mom, I recall that my mom had a hybrid at one point and she liked it. She went back to combustion engine because I think it was expensive and frustrating to replace even the hybrid battery. but it's an interesting situation all the time, all around. The companies that are doing the worst on this, I think, tragically, are companies that have a history of spectacular vehicles like Jaguar, or what is it, Jaguar for our British friends. Um, they've recently rolled out like concept art for new EV line. I think they're talking about going all EV. I think it's going to be a major mistake for them. I don't think they'll ever recover from this. Oh, something in my eye. So yeah, it's an interesting situation all around. I hope that the Trump administration just nukes the CAFE standards and stuff, so that we can get a little bit more market realism into the car market, but we'll see.
The EV thing is driven entirely not by technology, but by government support and subsidies. Ford was taking its marching orders from the federal government. The truth is, you will save thousands of car makers, workers' jobs, auto workers' jobs, if you move away from EVs, because people by and large don't want them. And when government support stops, sales will largely stop. You have, I believe it's Rivian, but it may be Fisker. Yes, Fisker does still exist despite bankrupting twice.
Just barely.
That recently received another lifeline from the federal government under Biden. They have failed repeatedly, and Biden says, "Oh, let's just throw another $1 billion down the black, a couple of $1 billion down the black hole because we like the technology, even if the public doesn't." Well, the car makers should be like an Ayn Rand character. They should say, you know what? We make a product for a profit. That means satisfying the consumers. We simply aren't going to make EVs. Not that we're going to accept these government subsidies. We're not going to make them because we lose money. And if the government wants to say, you can no longer buy well, we've mandated it, so you can't sell GM, or the government would collapse if they could no longer sell cars in this country. They certainly wouldn't say, okay, well, we'll just import all our cars. You think Trump will allow the import of all those cars and the bankruptcy of every automaker? No. Do you think Biden would have really allowed that? No. If they just said, no, we're not going to do it. We're going to follow what the public wants, not what the politicians want. They wouldn't have lost all this money if they hadn't gone down this path, thinking somehow the government support would be enough to make them profitable. The technology, Linnea's right. If people want the technology, that's fine. But not only should we not have to pay for it, we shouldn't pretend that that it would exist otherwise. I'll tell you privately, my mother, well, not privately, I'm online. My mother's sort of a scofflaw. She has had a hybrid for about a decade and a half now, and she liked it. And the battery went out about 3 years ago. And she found out how much it was going to cost to replace the battery. And now she runs it only on gasoline. She can't get it inspected. So the inspection is a little out of date, folks, because they want the batteries in it and it running. But the point is, so she's running on a very inefficient gasoline engine in a hybrid. These things are messes. Bus manufacturers are going under. Truck manufacturers are going under. If the market doesn't support it, then it shouldn't be forced onto the market.
Anthony?
Yeah, I guess really it boils down to this: EV or not EV? That is the question.
All right.
Boo.
Boo. we don't know.
That was perhaps Anthony's wittiest comment of all the time he's been on here.
That was top half for sure. Okay. All right. Let's move on to our third crazy climate news item of the week. And it's really not crazy. It's just something that we do around here a lot, and that is climate fact checks. Here, get the right thing up. Okay, and so we. Here we go. Climate fact check of January. So the Heartland Institute, our friends over at the Competitive Enterprise Institute, Steve Malloy over at Junk Science. We put together, if you go to climaterealism.com, we put together every month a climate fact check. And we just released the January 2025 edition of the Climate Fact Check. And its purpose is to, we scan, that's what the kind of the purpose of the entire Climate Realism site. We keep an eye on the news, we see climate lies and misrepresentations, and we correct them. And so in January, it says here, counter narrative reality versus counter reality narrative. It was a busy January, keeping track of President Trump's first steps towards dismantling of the federal government's climate leviathan. It was also a very cold January, and that's what this edition of Climate Fact Check will cover. So per the relatively unmanipulated NASA satellite data, January 2025 is estimated to have witnessed a substantial drop of 0.34 degrees C from last January with respect to the made-up metric, as Sterling just mentioned, of average global temperature. This is despite that atmospheric carbon dioxide has increased from about 422 parts per million in January of last year to 426 parts per million in January 2025. That 4 part per million increase in CO2 is worth about 70 billion tons of emissions. Therefore, 78 billion more tons of CO2 in the atmosphere resulted in a January that was 0.34 degrees Celsius cooler than the previous January. So that is an idea of kind of what the climate fact check is here. And Anthony, on this, I know Sterling, you're the one who posted this on our website, but you can see there. And let me see if I can add to the stage a chart that looks a little easier to read. There we go. So you can see here from this chart that January 2024, 0.08 degrees Celsius above the anomaly, and then boom, you can see that January 2025 is a big dip from there. Anthony, you want to take us through some of this?
Yeah, it's basically a transient response in the atmosphere to two events, like I said before. An El Nino, big one in the Pacific, combined with the extra water vapor, the most powerful greenhouse gas ejected by the Hunga volcano up into the stratosphere, where billions and billions of tons of extra water vapor were injected into the atmosphere. Now, we talked about this months ago, that this was going to start coming down, and boom, here it is.
Mm-hmm.
That basically what we've got here is we've got a better track record talking about this than all these peer-reviewed numbskulls out there that are saying, it's danger, Will Robinson, and all this stuff. It's just basically the atmosphere doing what the atmosphere is going to do when it's pushed a little bit. So, the Earth's self-stabilized here. And this is a good point about not having runaway greenhouse effect. We get this big push from water vapor, and El Nino combined. And what happened? Well, we didn't go into runaway greenhouse like they talked about years ago. The Earth stabilized itself. The Earth is a self-regulating mechanism for temperature.
Absolutely. Very good points. I was going to pop up the, you had written about it this week, this story here said note to CNN, because I was going to ask, I thought 2024 was the hottest year on record and all that stuff. And so you say no, CNN and BBC, 2024 wasn't the hottest year on record when all available evidence is considered. That's yet another fact check that we provide here at climaterealism.com and the Climate Realism Show. Why was it not? What's the extra data, or what's the fuller picture that does not make 2024 the hottest year on record, Anthony?
Well, there's all kinds of things going into this. First of all, the claim is coming from Copernicus. Now, this is a modeled temperature system coming out of Europe, where they're using what they call resampled data. And so it's not exactly an absolute temperature measurement of the Earth. It's more of an estimate than an actual measurement. And so there's that. And then I will point out the fact that we've had these other two things happen. The water vapor from the Hunga Tonga and also for the El Nino. So you combine that along with the fact that we've got so much bias in the surface temperature measurement system, it's just basically not surprising at all that they would make these claims. But when you look at the UAH data, it's not as high, the satellite data. But of course, they don't like to look at the satellite data. Here's the craziest thing. NASA, Goddard Institute for Space Studies, won't even recognize the satellite data. In fact, Gavin Schmidt, the guy who runs it now after James Hansen retired, would not even appear on stage with Dr. Roy Spencer, who runs the satellite record, because he didn't want to acknowledge its validity. So NASA, who does satellites, won't even acknowledge the validity of a satellite temperature. How crazy is that?
I don't think Gavin's still there. Under Gavin, what they did was not just not acknowledge it. They have a whole unit set up at Alabama Huntsville that managed NASA satellites, that calibrated them, that set them up, that made sure they were in good order. And under Gavin Schmidt, they jettisoned all that after decades of investment and said, we're going to use a private party's satellites. Why? Because the private party started to skew their satellite data to adjust it upward.
Yeah, that's RSS.
That was the RSS feed. But in recent years, even the RSS feed has come down. So, NASA's stuck. They are trying to massage the data, basically with a meat cleaver. And the people who are the keepers of the data, they're saying, well, even we can't be stretched that far. Sorry. Yeah. Even we can't go along with you. And so my suspicion is that NASA is about to go back when the contract's up to UAH because RSS is not giving them what they need.
Right. And, there's so much climate and energy and environment news to cover this week that a leading contender was that Elon Musk's Doge team headed into the offices of NOAA this week, and that employees at NOAA are shaking with fear of what may happen to them and their careers and to all of this stuff. So we are keeping an eye on that. That might be a good topic for next week, but it's a new day, and we're hoping and watching that science and not politics will start to be the predominant thought process in some of these very important federal agencies. So
if you have any sense of mercy or humanity, you hope that NOAA's main buildings are not very tall and that all their windows are locked and can't be opened when Doge goes in there. Yeah,
that's true. All right, we'll leave that there. I want to get on to our main topic today, which the more I looked into this week, the angrier I got. I'm not trying to induce global anger or even anger just in our little circle of friends here, but goodness gracious, I got a little upset. So as you may have heard, actually, because it was covered here on this show not too long ago, and that actually was on December 6th, that we covered the undercover Project Veritas expose in which an EPA employee under Biden, whose responsibility it was to shovel money out of EPA to all these NGOs and all these things that were happening. They were happening for years in our government, but the American public was completely ignorant of it. We had no idea this was happening. And so, he talked about, throwing what he considered throwing gold bars off the Titanic before, a real captain came in and took the wheel. And, we have some good news on that front. You may have seen this video. I've clipped a little bit of it, but this is our new EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, and he's not going to take it anymore. Well, let me roll this video for everybody.
An extremely disturbing video circulated 2 months ago, featuring a Biden EPA political appointee talking about how they were tossing gold bars off the Titanic, rushing to get billions of your tax dollars out the door before Inauguration Day. The gold bars were tax dollars, and tossing them off the Titanic meant the Biden administration knew they were wasting it. Fortunately, my awesome team at EPA has found the gold bars. Shockingly, roughly 20 billion of your tax dollars were parked at an outside financial institution by the Biden EPA. This scheme was the first of its kind in EPA history, and it was purposefully designed to obligate all of the money in a rush job with reduced oversight. Even further, this pot of $20 billion was awarded to just 8 entities that were then responsible for doling out your money to NGOs and others at their discretion with far less transparency. Just under $7 billion was sent to one entity called the Climate United Fund. I'm sure you and I now have some of the same questions. How do these organizations decide how to allocate funding? How much money have they given out so far and to whom? Are there any former Biden EPA staffers who are now working at these entities? The financial agent agreement with the bank needs to be instantly terminated, and the bank must immediately return all of the gold bars that the Biden administration tossed off the Titanic. EPA needs to reassume responsibility for all of these funds. We will review every penny that has gone out the door. I will be referring this matter to the Inspector General's office, and will work with the Justice Department as well. The days of irresponsibly shoveling boatloads of cash to far-left activist groups in the name of environmental justice and climate equity are over.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should be so lucky. And I apologize to the viewers and the listeners. The audio was apparently kind of low. I didn't mean it to be that low. I thought I boosted it, but thank goodness I put captions so that you could all read what was going on there. But you may have heard there that, and I actually had to listen to this twice because I thought this can't be right. This can't be right. That they gave $7 million billion would it be? I'm sorry. This is like I said, I couldn't believe it. $7 billion to one outfit. And that outfit is called the Climate United. And I actually went to their website. I have it here on screen. It reads, leveraging its $6.97 billion award from the Environmental Protection Agency's National Clean Investment Fund. So that's the gold bars that were being shoveled out of off the deck of the Titanic, because this grant was awarded in November after the election. Climate United is launching this new innovative program to provide up to $30 million in technical assistance and planning support for community-led projects that increase energy independence, resiliency, reduce greenhouse gas emissions and pollution, and save money. Pre-development grants of up to $300,000 will be awarded over the course of multiple application rounds. The first round of Climate United Next grants will support clean energy products in Native communities and will be open to nonprofit organizations, state and local entities, Indian tribes, and institutes of higher education. And the deadline to apply for the first round of Climate United Next grants is February 24th, 2025, with the announcements planned for late February. So we missed out, guys. We missed out on this. Now, what's really remarkable about this, and something a little bit of research I did, Climate United was founded in 2023. And they instantly get access to literally billions of our taxpayer dollars. And I looked at their 2023 990 form. They had total revenues in their first year of $557,000. And then by the end of the following year, they're awarded a grant of $6.7 billion with no record of good governance or even competence in this field. That is insane. People, that is insane. Now, this is a long setup, and you guys are going to get to go crazy because I'm getting to go crazy now. So, I have
it's
go ahead.
Projection on the left. They're always saying about us. Like these folks over at some of these different outfits that slam us all the time. Oh, the Heartland Institute. They're the evil ones. They're getting millions of dollars from big oil. Billions.
Right.
They're getting billions, right?
Literally billions.
Just imagine what we could do with $1 million. We don't even have that.
Right. It's crazy. And so here I have on the screen our friend Stephen McIntyre, and a lot of our listeners and viewers, and I know everybody on this panel recognizes that name. He, along with Ross McKittrick, exposed the fraud. That's what I said, Michael Mann, the fraud of the hockey stick, with without a doubt. He notes that the Climate United Fund, in which Biden appears to have parked $6.97 billion of our dollars, is a coalition of 3 501c3 organizations: Calvert Impact Capital, Community Preservation Corporation, and Self-Help Credit Union. That's perfect. They are helping themselves, as Steve Malloy joked on X, to our money. He looked very quickly at the financial statements, did Stephen McIntyre, at each of these three participants. Calvert Impact shows a 2023 balance sheet of $520 million portfolio investments and $154 million in cash. Now, if they have that kind of money, why aren't they spending their money to do all of these good things for the environment instead of taking $7 billion of our money? And this is just one entity that got funds. Who knows how many there are, and how many shell groups are out there to making it hard to track the money. And I just want to go ahead. I got more, but go ahead. I got more good stuff.
Your criticism is totally unwarranted because these people are saving the planet, and that's all that matters.
They're saving nothing, and they're filling their pockets.
I wonder what the overhead is like at these NGOs.
Well, no, you now know what the overhead is like. Charity Navigator would give these guys a 0, a negative star. How do you know that? 6.7 billion. They're going to spend 30 or what it was either 30 or 300 million helping people get clean green homes. What happened to the other $6.697 billion that you received? That's like the overhead there is like 99%. It's we're keeping it for ourselves, but we're going to give a little, we're going to give a little bit to help the poor and the natives put solar panels on their homes. But we got to steward the rest of that, for climate change over time. Wow.
Yeah.
That's gall, man. That's gall to receive $6.7 billion and say you're going to spend less than 1%.
The idea that it is remotely appropriate to give $7 billion to one NGO that incorporated not even 2 years ago is so absolutely crazy. It's like you would have to, if there was a smidge of an instinct for good governance in the United States, somebody would raise their hand and go, "Are we sure about that?" I mean,
no transparency.
They literally just went into business like on Thursday, and we're going to give them $7 billion. And again, this money, they make their little announcement of what we're going to do, apply for your grants. Is there any oversight about that? Is anybody auditing this? Is anybody saying, hey, you are now dispersing $7 billion of our tax money? Is anybody watching and wondering where it's going, who it's for, what is happening? No, there's no auditing of any of this, which is why all this kind of nonsense has to stop. One more example that kind of, made me go crazy. It's not at the scale of $7 billion. It's only $20 million. So everybody just calm down. This is fine, right? So $20 million, our friend Steve Malloy at Junk Science on X alerted me to this. There's a nonprofit called Democracy Green. Democracy Green was formed in 2018, according to its website, but it only actually got its proper 501c3 nonprofit status, which the Heartland Institute has had since 1984, so 40 years. They only got their 501c nonprofit status. They only bothered getting around to it in 2023. It doesn't have a 990 form on its website like you can find on heartland.org, but it reported no income at all in 2023. And then the very next year, it gets a $20 million grant from Biden's EPA to pursue quote unquote climate justice. That is insane. That is wasteful. This outfit, nobody knows what they're doing, why they're doing it. Their thing says, look, you can read it up on the screen here. Let me see if I can bring it up fuller screen so it's easier to read. Yeah. It says, as we stand on the brink of transformative change for our communities, this grant of $20 million from US EPA represents not just funding, but a profound commitment to justice, resilience, and sustainability. And this, they apparently got $20 million by pitching to EPA a quote unquote clean water is safe water initiative. Well, no kidding. Clean water is safe water. You're supposed to give someone $20 million because they can write that sentence. I mean, this is, guys, this is the tip of the iceberg of the amount of graft that the environmental left gets from us, the taxpayers. We give no consent to the use of our tax money, our hard-earned money for this sort of stuff. And then as Anthony, as you pointed out earlier, the converse is true of organizations like the Heartland Institute and CFACT and CEI and other climate realism groups. We are not swimming in endless millions and dollars, maybe even billions of dollars of money. All of the money in any real sense of the term goes to the environmental left. And they've been using it to suppress our speech, to impose terrible policies in the United States and around the world. And now, thank you, Elon Musk is exposing this for the first time in detail to the world. My rant's over. Go ahead.
Yeah. So no transparency, no accountability, because they didn't draw up contracts. Normally when you have a contractor, you say, oh, well, we'll give you this money, but here are the things you have to meet, and we're going to do your audits. Biden didn't go through any of that. They just shoveled it out the door. They didn't have time to. This isn't the first round they've done it. They did it last year as well, with groups that had just formed. One of them was working out of their mother's basement or his bedroom. He'd had $2,500 in income the previous year, got hundreds of millions of dollars. It's madness. And as much as I expressed concern last week, like my dog is expressing now.
Your dog's more upset than you are.
Yeah. Well, she sees somebody somewhere in the horizon. About Doge and the treasury, whatever else you say about Elon Musk and Doge and what's going on there, they are complaining. The Dems are complaining about what Doge is doing, not about what Doge is finding. And the largest, the benefit, the biggest benefit that will come from Doge is all the transparency, all the truth that is coming out. We have had inspectors general who have reported on this crap before, and they were routinely ignored by Congress. He has the megaphone, and he's putting it out there, and it's going to be hard to ignore. So, kudos to Doge for that. Exposing this crap. I hope they can claw back that $20 billion.
It's not a done deal.
I hope they can claw. Well, you say done deal. If it's in their pockets, go to court and see if you can take it back.
That's right.
You say done deal. I say the courts will have a say in that.
It was money that was sent out illegally, so it should be a legal matter to get it back.
Now you say sent out illegally, they will say there was a Inflation Reduction Act that had this spending, and Biden spent it under the Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, look, I just don't think it's going to be as simple as we all hope. Whatever's money's in that bank, maybe they can get that back, but they spent $7 billion to somebody. It's in their bank account. And what they say is possession is 9/10 of the law. So let the lawsuits be filed. We'll see how much we get back. I hope they can claw it all back. Anything that's not spent. We already know they've stopped spending on the EV charging stations. That's a blessing. We spent billions of dollars on EV charging stations and got 58 whole chargers at about 16 stations around the country. What a waste that has been. Most expensive charging stations in existence. So Doge is doing the country a service, whether it's democracy in action, whether it's being legal, done properly. I can't speak to that. What I can say is they're opening people's eyes to just how badly their government function and misspends their hard-earned money.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what more could I add? I just what people should realize about this is that this isn't like a new thing that just started under Biden. This isn't just a new thing even that started under Obama. This has been how our government has worked for decades. There's billions and trillions of dollars at play, and it just goes, I don't know, it goes somewhere. It just evaporates into the wind as far as we're concerned. I mean,
except I think to one extent you're wrong. I think this last batch of funding that Biden just, as the gold bars they were shoveling for Titanic, it wasn't done in a normal way.
No, this was particularly egregious. But I'm saying in terms of the overall, like, where do our tax dollars go, especially when it comes to, the climate related funding. We've been talking about on this show for a long time the fact that it's very likely that a vast majority of climate spending is actually just like thinly veiled money laundering for people's personal projects.
Yeah. I mean, when the Biden administration says we are going to invest in climate justice, people are like, oh, all right, whatever. This is what they're doing. They're sending millions of dollars to non-governmental organizations that seem to be entirely funded by the government, which does not actually make them then a non-governmental organization, but outfits that literally propped up yesterday. It's unbelievable. Look, we're in the nonprofit world. It is unbelievable to establish a 501c3 nonprofit 1 year and then the next year have 30 million, 20 million, in one case, $7 billion in your pocket. It's impossible. The 501c3s that actually operate under the charity of the people work very hard and cherish every dollar that is donated to them. These groups, they just get your money from the taxpayer. And who knows what this group, climate democracy, you put the word democracy in your 501c3 and there's a Democrat in office, good for you. You're probably going to get some government money. But democracy green just pops up out of nowhere and gets $20 million. I mean, I don't mean to pick on them. All right, I do mean to pick on them because they are a great example of how this scam works. What could they possibly do? What expertise do they have to properly spend $20 million to make the water cleaner in rural North Carolina?
I've never heard of water treatment plants over there or something.
Let's be clear. Republicans should be on the record right now. We should hold them accountable. This is getting exposed. Any Republican that defends this spending, that doesn't say we're clawing this back, we're stopping it, it will never happen again. At this stage, they're on the other side. They are your enemy. They're not your friend, no matter what they say when they run for election the next time. Oh, I'm a conservative. They're not conservative if they don't end this craziness. Yeah. Now, you just can't have that kind of madness. I was going to say something about the 20 million, but it's like just no accountability. I can't imagine what they would spend this on, except conservatives used to rail about the welfare mother who drove the Cadillac and had the cell phone. Small potatoes, folks. This lady is the biggest, not just this lady, but the other group, the $6.7 billion. You think they're going to be driving subcompacts, that their offices aren't expanding dramatically? They're getting all new upgraded computer systems. These are the welfare mothers of the modern age. It's all green. And if we're not going to, if conservatives aren't willing to attack that, when they went after these little, these poor people in the slums who had a Cadillac, a large screen TV, and a cell phone, then the Republicans are just illegitimate as well.
Listening to all this, I want to say this has been the most rant-tastic episode ever.
Well, I am the Archbishop of Ranterbury, I believe.
Yeah, I'm
going to give you one of those hats after your comment last week.
Okay.
All right, let's get on to Q&A, Linnea. We're already running a little late, but we have a lot of comments.
Sure thing. Yes, we sure do. I'm going to put this up here for a second. This is from David Voigt, who says, do we get to judge the rants from today's show?
Maybe we can put up some kind of meter or something, Rantometer.
Yeah. Okay. And then this comment that just came up from Data 12 on Rumble. I thought this question says, how many artifacts are recorded with University of Wyoming located from the state of Wyoming? How many millions? 1 to 2 million? And I wasn't really sure what you were talking about at first, and I was about to get excited because I thought you were talking about like the University of Wyoming's fossil museum, and I was going to say they're almost all from Wyoming. That's, but the millions doesn't make any sense at all. And then you clarified. You said how many of the artifacts show global climate change. I'm not sure what artifacts we're talking about. Are like temperature artifacts? I don't really know. You might want to clarify this question a bit more, Data, and we'll get back to you. Let's go to questions from the beginning of the show. As always, we have at least one grand solar minimum question. He says, Ted Clark says, please address the upcoming grand solar minimum. I think, Anthony, you can take that one, but I think basically the answer is going to be we don't really know when the grand solar minimum is going to be. So
it's been predicted that it hasn't occurred, and so it's a non-thing. It doesn't exist yet.
Yep. So we can't really. It's very it's a way more difficult to predict space weather than it is to predict Earth weather, and that's already pretty hard. So. All right. Brian says, do you think the CRs will be remonetized anytime soon, given the way that the government has gone, I assume? I think that's asking about us. Are we going to be remonetized, Jim?
Oh my gosh. No, I don't anticipate it. You know, we're going to keep applying, but it would be nice. It's not even just, look, we didn't make hardly any money like on super chats. We do appreciate everyone who did give us a super chat back in the day when we were monetized. That's not really the most valuable part of being monetized. Being monetized puts you kind of like on the upper levels, on the top shelf of shows and channels. Because if you're demonetized, the algorithm thinks that you're not as good or maybe shady. And so, that's why we were demonetized. It wasn't because we were making so much money or anything like that. It was to get us off of the preferred part of the algorithm. And so that's why we want to get back to it. And we will keep applying. But, you keep trying and it doesn't work, and you start to not try to get your hopes up. So
you got to remember that where we were demonetized, which is YouTube, isn't owned by Musk.
Right.
That's owned by one of the people who's not caving immediately and as much to the Trump administration or working with them as much. YouTube is owned, I believe, by Bezos's Google.
Bezos doesn't own Google. Bezos is Amazon, but it's owned by Google, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're on Rumble. You can put a few coins in the tin can for us on Rumble if you like. But YouTube is where most of our viewers are, and so we like to get that fully up. We'll see.
Yep. Yeah. And Charles Rotter says, how's Rumble doing? Rumble is okay, Charles, for the 100 people that use it. It doesn't have quite the base built up yet for this kind of content. Who knows? Maybe it will in the future. For now, YouTube and X seem to be where it's at. So we're going to stick around on all of the accounts that we can for as long as we can. All right. Here's a question from our friend Chris in New Zealand, who says, question regarding Paris. What sanctions, if any, will USA suffer due to withdrawing from Paris? New Zealand government is fearful that we will suffer somehow if we withdraw.
Well, gosh, the UN will say bad things about us. That's about it.
You got to remember, Paris had no penalties. Paris had no, there was no legal mechanism to enforce it. The Paris Agreement was go back to your countries, develop your own climate goals in line with keeping it to 1.5, but it was all voluntary. And so you can't be punished for not meeting a voluntary goal.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you very much. Okay. I'm going to hit this question from David Voigt again, who says, didn't we have worsening tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, and wildfires? No. Any additional information? So no, guys, despite the increase in media coverage, a lot of this is going to be a media coverage kind of artifact that we're seeing when it comes to how it feels like hurricanes and tornadoes and earthquakes and wildfires are getting worse. They're actually not, when you look at the data. So no, climate change is not causing an increase in these events. And also geoengineering is not causing an increase in these events. They're not increasing.
What geoengineering?
Well, what I'm saying, Anthony, is that there is something that's floating around out there right now where people are saying there's an increase in
Right.
these extreme weather events because the government is doing it or because some
Oh yeah, the whole chemtrail
organization is doing it.
crazy cloud.
But what I'm saying is, if that was the case, you would see it in the data, and it's not in the data. So
Right.
no, it's just not happening. All right. Let's go to Chris. Oh, we already got one from Chris. Hang on. Sorry, Chris. We're going to get someone else before we get to you again. All right. Above Us Only Sky asks, how much of the heat from El Nino and stuff last year was absorbed by the oceans? And also, I think solar and...
Is he talking about carbon dioxide or money?
Well, who knows? I think this is
throwing the bars off the Titanic, right? You know, how much was absorbed by the ocean?
I think this question, Above Us Only Sky, can clarify in the comments if he's still listening. But
yeah, I would
means
point out, folks, when you make a comment, it may be obvious to you, but it's not obvious to us. So please elaborate just a little bit.
Yeah, because we can only get to these kind of towards the end of the show. I try to bring them up if I can live, but it's a lot easier for us to do it during Q&A. So if you can add just a little bit of context to your question when you put it in, that helps. But I think that this comment came up while we were talking about the climate fact check section, with last year being a good little spike on the temperature chart. So, Anthony, you got anything for this?
I'm sorry, I don't have the context to answer. I really don't. I'm not trying to be facetious.
Oh,
I just don't
okay.
know.
Here's Above Us Only Sky is clarifying the CO2. If there's how much CO2 is going to be absorbed by the oceans.
All right. The oceans are the big kahuna of CO2 sinks on the planet. And they are outgassing right now because the planet is getting warmer. Naturally, we've had a natural variation that's occurred since around 1850. The planet has gradually gotten warmer. And so there's been some outgassing of CO2 from, or not some, a lot of outgassing of CO2 from the oceans. And the reason for this is because the warmer it gets, the less CO2 solubility there is in water. And you can prove this to yourself if you want to take this risk. Get yourself a soda pop bottle and put it in your car under the sun and then try to open it and it'll, right? But if you do the same thing, put it outside in the winter where it gets down to like, you know, below freezing and open it, it's not going to do anything. And that's the whole premise of CO2 solubility.
The other thing to think about, though, is that as the outgassing has occurred, the Earth has greened. And even the oceans are in some places getting, more fecund with algae and microalgae and, the systems of life in the oceans that start at the smallest levels, and then the food chain starts, and some of that is captured back in the oceans. But the outgassing should assuage some of the concern about ocean acidification, turning the oceans into an acid bath, because if CO2 is being emitted, then it's not being absorbed in the oceans and turning them, alkaline.
Right. Okay.
Phytoplankton. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
From Slartibart Fast, we have, can we look forward to Gore and Kerry in handcuffs after Doge investigates climate funds?
Unless those guys have actually thrown some money out illegally or done something underhandedly illegally, probably not, because all these guys are just blowhards.
I'm not even sure if they were found to have done that Trump would prosecute them. Remember, he's letting Eric Adams off the hook. He's letting Blagojevich off the hook. He was convicted of doing this stuff, and admits, has ultimately admitted he did some of that stuff. So Trump is not doing political prosecutions. I don't think that he would do it for Gore and Kerry as much as I'd like to see it if they did something wrong.
He let Hillary off the hook, so he's
I mean, he's not, unlike the people that have gone after him. He's not an overly vindictive guy for people in power.
Yep. Yeah. And to those fans of his who are a little bit vindictive, they're pretty frustrated with it too.
Oh yeah. Well, you
It's
look,
funny.
he's got the former senator from New Jersey going, I hope Trump will now issue me a pardon, right? You talking about gold bars off the Titanic? He had them in his closet. But he's angling for a pardon, and I won't be surprised if he gets one.
All right, let's get a few more in here.
Okay, let me look for some having to do with our. Okay, here's a good question. I'm going to hit Chris again here because this is a good question actually that I've seen come up quite a bit recently. Why is NASA interested in global air temperatures at all? Well, NASA runs a lot of they run our satellites, they run our space program. NASA has a whole lot of satellites up having to do with Earth monitoring, different types of Earth monitoring, remote sensing systems. Anthony probably has a bit more detail to add to this, but they do collect this kind of data all the time anyway. So I think the problem comes in where they're trying to interpret or skew the data that they're collecting in order to push narratives. They're interested in global air temperatures because they're basically testing our satellites on the Earth so that they can use that data to look at other planets, other bodies in space, and be able to make comparisons. But yeah, as far as climate stuff goes, that's really not their job.
No, it's not. And I will say this, that the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies would not exist today if they didn't go down the path of, global temperatures for climate. They were an Apollo program appointment, creation. And when the Apollo program ended and, all these different missions that they'd planned ended, because back then they had this idea that, gosh, we're spending way too much money on sending things into space. We need to focus on the Earth a little bit, and so James Hansen went before NASA in June 1988 and said, we have a crisis. The world's getting warmer and it's carbon dioxide. And here's my graph and here's my projections. And that was basically the whole beginning of it all. And then, it just, right after that.
Well, and if you've ever, if you're a space nerd or whatever, and you're looking at a lot of NASA's products that they put out for Earth monitoring related stuff, it is really interesting. And I mean, obviously the photographs that they've gotten are spectacular. It's very, very good technology, and it's very, very good data. It's just the way that they're using it is crooked. Okay, real quick. Mark Adesso asks, what's in the cup? I have Earl Grey tea in this cup, and it's one of my favorite cups. It says Oofda. It's great. If you're from the North, you understand. Okay. Now we have, let's go. Female KC Royals fan who hasn't asked a question in a while, so I'm happy to hear from you, says, doesn't a lot of government overspending lead to inflation issues? So I'm going to pitch that to you, Sterling.
Well, yeah, inflation is always a monetary issue. And when the government puts more money into the economy and there's no more production, prices rise, when they print, whether it's printing money, which they're always doing when they're spending. Remember, we don't bring in tax dollars sufficient to meet our spending in any year since, I'm sure there were some when I was young, after the Vietnam War, there might have been a brief period where taxes exceeded spending, but not for decades. And all of that money being put into the economy, when it's not going to productive uses, when it's not creating products, when it's not creating jobs, market-oriented jobs, not government-oriented jobs, because they're tax drains, not tax revenue producers. Basically, it's bad dollars, and that causes inflation.
Yep.
More spending, more dollars than there is production increases prices because people want more. Look, if you give me free money, I'm going to want to spend it, but that doesn't mean that the production is out there. So the prices rise. This is Economics 101. Prices will rise to meet demand.
Well, we have time. We only have time for one or two more questions, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the ones we have next, which are all related, and kind of combine them into one. But I'm going to read them off in rapid fashion, and then we're just going to kind of pitch it to the group to comment on the general theme here. Okay, so from Albert says, will Doge look into Climate United funding? Bob Johnson says, how many new Cylindras are out there? Albert asks again, why isn't this trending in the news regarding the, the gold bars issue? And then above us only sky, how come the MSM missed this?
Well, I would say because the media is complicit in the funding. For example, the Associated Press gets all these subscriptions from the government, through USAID and all that stuff. So they're complicit, and they have talked about the grants that they get in the Associated Press to write about the climate crisis. No, they're not going to write about the climate not happening. They're going to write about the climate crisis because they're paid to do that. And there's all this money that's being thrown like this into these subscriptions. And this is an old scam in the left where, they would do it with books, for example. They would buy, 1,000 copies of somebody's book to give them funding, and then they'd sit in a warehouse somewhere, like at the end of the Raiders with the Lost Ark. So the whole thing is just one big money scam. And, I've been thinking that Inflation Reduction Act, given what we've seen from it so far, should be renamed to the Inflation Act. Yeah. That's really what happened.
The Inflation Production Act.
Yeah.
The stuff about this subscription, there are some publications that probably wouldn't exist but for the government subscriptions. I suspect that if these are cut off, as Trump has said they will be done and has directed it to do, institutions like Politico will shrink in size considerably. They will close publications because they won't be kept afloat by government dollars. And as far as, what Doge will go after, I hope they go after, I hope that they point out all of it and the Republicans in Congress then go after it, because that's ultimately who's going to have to do a lot of this stuff. Maybe the Justice Department can play a role. But that's enough for me.
Well, I'll just put a capper on it. I mean, Abel Windsor just put on there that the USAID funding to the Associated Press is now $52 million and climbing. Anthony mentioned that the Associated Press is given donations specifically to report on the climate crisis. That is in addition to all the subscriptions that the thousands of bureaucrats are having paid for with your money. But there are non-governmental nonprofits out there that are just giving money directly to the AP. Use this to hire climate alarmist reporters and to write a climate alarmist story every hour on the hour for weeks on end. Where do you think now? What we may find is, where are those nonprofits out there that are paying the AP to write these stories getting their funding? I would bet dollars to donuts that a lot of that is USAID being funneled through a second step. And so this perpetual funding machine that is hopefully being brought to an end thanks to Doge. I mean, Albert, you said, will Doge look into Climate United funding? Well, they kind of already have. They've exposed that they got $20 million, and that's the point. Doge doesn't have any power over their internal accounting. You are supposed to be audited every year as a 501c3 to ensure that you still earn and deserve your nonprofit status. The Heartland Institute is every year independently audited to make sure that we are on the up and up and not, misusing the funds that the people that are generous enough to give to the Heartland Institute give us. And so are these places being audited? Well, they just went into business 4 weeks ago. So they probably haven't been audited yet. So the good news is that finally, as the saying goes, sunlight is the best disinfectant. We finally, after decades of this kind of scamming going on, have sunlight upon the whole scheme. And it's going to be very interesting to see how it develops from here on out, because the other side is now in the position of defending basically theft and fraud and money laundering and nest feathering with your own tax dollars. Good luck to you out there. I'd rather be on this side of the argument, wondering why our money is being wasted to advance climate alarmism and a bunch of other stuff.
To the extent that they're covering this at all, in the mainstream media, not in the blogosphere, is they're covering that Doge is doing this. That why is Doge over here? Why is Doge over there? Well, they're not a government agent. They're not covering the substance of what Doge is discovering. They're critiquing the structure and the method of doing it, and that's because they're benefiting from it.
Yep.
Yep,
All right.
that's all we got.
That's all we got, and that is our exit music for today. Gosh, what a great show today! I want to thank the we had 1,700 at least people watching on all sorts of streaming services this Friday, February 14th. We want to thank everyone who watched us live, and of course all those who are going to watch it on tape later on our places where it is, on X, on YouTube, and on Rumble. I want to thank our three regular panelists, Linnea, Anthony, and Sterling Burnett. I want to thank our streaming partners, Climate Realism, Climate at a Glance, What's Up With That, and the CO2 Coalition. Always visit heartland.org. Always visit What's Up With That. Always come back to this here show every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. Central Time. Thank you all for watching, and we will talk to you next week.